And now, the Disney Parks Podcast, Infotainment segment.
As show writer for Walt Disney Imagineering, our guest today helped create the magic for many of the world's most beloved attractions, including the Jungle Cruise, Epcot's World Showcase, and the former Great Movie Ride, and so many more. In fact, our guest is actually going to be joining us now on a monthly basis to discuss all things behind the magic. He'll bring us great fun and insight on how Disney creates its unique magic. Please welcome to the Disney Parks Podcast, Mr. Brian Collins. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Woo! Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you, Tony and John. Looking forward to it.
And there's the buttons. All right, so we're so glad that you're here, and we're super excited that you wanted to be a part of this, and I can't wait to hear over the next several months the stories that you're going to share. We just had a little discussion before we started recording. Guys, we've got some exciting stories coming about some of the most beloved attractions at Disney. So I can't wait to hear them, and I can't wait to experience them.
I can't wait to hear them either.
I can make stuff up all day.
Yeah, great.
That sounds great. I'll make it up as I go.
Yeah, right. Gosh. So, Brian, we like to ask everybody that comes on is like, how did your journey with Disney begin? How did it all start? You know, were you in the college program, or were you at college and they handpicked you? What's the story?
Probably goes back to a lot of money and groveling. But before that, so I was actually born in Miami, grew up in South Florida, and it had been the very first time, I'm going to age myself here, but the very first time I ever went to Disney was in 1972. So within a year of the park opening, and you know, what kid doesn't walk down Main Street and you look at the castle and go in the attractions and say, man, wouldn't it be kind of cool to be someone who thinks all this stuff up? And
right.
I never really, you know, I wouldn't say I like set my sights from that point forward on being an Imagineer. I don't know if I even knew what Imagineers were, to be honest, way back then.
Yeah.
But as I went on with school and college and everything, my degree was in advertising, and I always thought I'd be an advertising copywriter. I always loved to write, and tried to get a job at an ad agency. Couldn't get one, and boy, are they sorry now. Couldn't get a job at an ad agency, but I wound up getting a job at a video production company in Miami. And they hired me as a script writer. I didn't know a thing about video production, and just kind of started going out with the producers and directors and learned how to do that, and eventually wound up producing and directing the in-flight entertainment program for Eastern Airlines. If you remember them, sponsor of If You Have Wings, right?
Yep.
One of the originals at the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
And so Eastern Airlines went bankrupt, moved up to Orlando because I have like a whole year of experience under my belt, right? And to make a long story short, thought that they, you know, be ready to kind of hand me the golden key to Main Street. And they're like, not so fast, hotshot.
Yeah.
And I wound up getting a job at the front desk of the Contemporary Resort.
Wow.
So it's checking in guests.
Yeah.
And it actually turned out to be a great job because that's where I kind of like cut my teeth on the Disney culture. I learned about Disney guest service. I learned how to network within the company and all those things. And my timing happened to be like really good because it was just a few months before Disney MGM Studios were opening up. And back in that time, you know, that's when we were on my watch, Sklar and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So there was a lot of excitement within Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
Lots of great new attractions and growth going on. So within a few months of getting my job, at the Contemporary, I started to kind of network in the company and work my way into other jobs that were related more to my background and skills. So I started like writing articles for Eyes and Ears, which is the company newspaper.
Sure. Yeah.
I produced some internal corporate training videos. I worked with the marketing department and openings of new attractions and resorts and stuff. And while all of that was going on, I also worked as a production assistant at the Disney MGM Studios, back then MGM Studios,
Right.
Because they were still very much a very active studio with a lot of production going on. So all these things kind of led me to start looking into, well, maybe I look into Imagineering.
Right.
Me and like a million other people. And I applied, a few times, try and network, got the names of some people in California, sent resumes out, got rejected a couple times. At one point, I'll tell you a very funny story. So at one point, I figured, well, I've got nothing to lose here.
Right.
They had actually had scheduled an interview for me, and were making travel arrangements and everything for me to go out to California and interview with WDI. And about a week or so before that, they pulled the plug on the interview for whatever reason. And I was like really obviously kind of frustrated. I was like, oh man, I can't believe that happened. So probably the act of a desperate man. I would not recommend this to anyone listening out there. But I went out. It's a true story. I went out. I bought a pair of the Mickey Mouse ears, traditional Mickey Mouse ears.
Right.
And I ripped off one of the ears. I stuck it in a ransom note. I cut out the individual letters, and it said something like, "Want to be a Disney Imagineer? Am holding corporate symbol as hostage, willing to negotiate." And I stuck it in there, sent it out to WDI, to their HR department, hoping that either whoever got it would either have a great sense of humor, or I was never, pulling like dark glasses were going to show up knocking on my door, and that'd be the end. Right. And fortunately, they had a good sense of humor. And shortly after that, I met the creative director at WDI here in Florida, and he gave me a test assignment. Guess he liked it, and brought me on as a show writer, and the rest, as it says, history. Yeah, it was a piece of cake, easy.
Yeah, simple, it's very interesting. Your story of the Mickey reminds me of Jason Grant telling his story. He kind of did something very similar. He created something and then sent it to Tony Baxter, and that's how he got Tony Baxter's attention, and then kind of got hired on too. So. I guess you have to be a creative and do something creative, and that really then, sparks the people go, oh, maybe we should kind of take a look at this guy. Maybe he's not that crazy.
Maybe.
Talk about writing. I was thinking about another person we had on the show, Greg Abar. I think he worked for Yellow Shoes. He used to write all the stuff on like the chocolate bars or the tea tins. All the kind of, little things like that. So I was thinking about that when you were talking about that.
It's kind of funny. After I moved on from Imagineering, I've always, ever since then, had like a downline relationship back to Disney and not even necessarily Imagineering, but just Disney in general. And at one point, I was actually doing a lot of contract work, like creative writing work for the Disney merchandise department. Yeah. And I think I wrote the blurbs for every Disney postcard that there ever was back in like the early 90s. I wrote copy for the back of VHS, back then when they still have VHSs, rather than say I'm going to age myself.
Right.
But like liner notes for that. I wrote slogans for T-shirts.
Wow. Wow.
Probably my most famous one was the Tower of Terror T-shirt that had Mickey looking at the elevator doors opening up, and on the back it said, "I suggest you take the stairs." So there you go.
Yeah, back when Disney did that in-house and didn't contract it out.
Right.
Yeah. So
So
talk about that. So, what does, in your bio, we said show writer. So what does a show writer do? The only person I know the only other person I know has that title is Jason Sorrell.
Yeah.
Who was, he was a show writer, and he did that over at Disney and then went to Universal until recently. So that's, you're the only two people I know that have show writer in your titles for Imagineering.
Yeah. So a show writer is actually a very well-defined role within the company. And Marty Sklar kind of started as a show writer way back in the day. So when we talk about show writing, it's not writing traditional shows like stage shows. It's writing for the Disney show as a whole, right?
Right.
So it's scripts and spiels for the attractions. It's any kind of like plaques in the park, creative signage, any kind of creative writing that they might need anywhere goes through the show writing area.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And, back in the day, again, when the studios were very active with production and you could take like the shuttle tour or you could take the walking tour, whatever the guest saw on any given day could change depending on what production was in the park. So the scripts had to constantly be updated with current information.
Yeah.
So that was a big part, actually, of what I did back then. Also for like the animation studio when they were still actively, hand inking animation here and working on all the, second wave Disney classics like Little Mermaid and Mulan and Beauty and the Beast.
Right.
So keeping those scripts fresh and things like that. So.
Yeah. How often did that stuff get updated? Like, say, the backstage tour at MGM back in the day. Because I would say, if I remember, things always were changing and moving because they were still using it as a studio.
Yeah, absolutely. They were. I would say at least weekly. To be honest, sometimes even more depending on what was going on. If a smaller production was coming in. Or if a production was coming in to set up. Obviously we would work very closely with park operations and production operations. So we'd have a handle on stuff that was coming in. But like when the Mickey Mouse Club came in, I remember, hanging out on the Mickey Mouse set all the time and chatting with the Mouseketeers and, who would ever thought Britney Spears and, these guys would have gone on. Yeah. Back then they were just,
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy.
What was the very first major project that you worked on? So once you got through the initial phase, you got into Disney Imagineering, and you were doing show writing for around the parks. What was the first major project? Not that the show writing around the parks isn't major, but what major attraction-y?
I guess there are a couple of things that come to mind. So the very first assignment I was given, actually, kind of like my test assignment, was the script for the tour of the animation building. My boss was a guy by the name of Mike West, great guy, was with WDI for a long, long time, and he too went to the other side and did great things over at Universal. Nothing bad to say about them. I mean, they're stuff's fantastic. But anyway, Mike gave me the script for the animation building tour, and he said, we want to see if we can freshen this up. It's just kind of a little flat. See what you can do with it. And that was kind of like my test assignment, and I brought it back, and I guess he liked it. And that turned out to be my very first script that was used as an Imagineer. I didn't know it at the time, obviously, when I was writing it. But but in terms of bigger than that, the shuttle and walking tours, the Great Movie Ride is probably the most high profile thing I did.
Yeah.
I plussed the script for the Great Movie Ride, and I worked on some of the staging inside the attraction. I also wrote a little bit of the Albert Awol radio broadcast at the Jungle Cruise.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
So when you would write a script for the animation courtyard or the animation tour, excuse me.
Yeah.
So you would write it. How soon would it actually hit the floor with the cast members?
It was usually fairly quick. I mean, I would write the scripts. They would go through Mike for his approval.
Mm-hmm.
And, as long as he signed off on it, I mean, there were times where, we had stuff going out the same day almost.
Wow.
If we had to. Other projects, maybe would go over a little bit more scrutiny, like the Great Movie Ride stuff.
Yeah.
Had to be looked at by some people higher up.
Right.
The Albert A. Walt radio broadcast, that had to go into production and be mixed together with all the sound effects and voiced out. That was done in California.
Yeah.
So that took a little bit longer. So really just kind of depended.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wouldn't even necessarily know. I remember one time I wrote some scripting for the Tiki Bird attraction.
Oh, wow.
Used to have what they called the Barker Bird out front.
Yes.
Which was a tiki bird that would like talk to the guests and like real kind of smart alecky kind of stuff. And at one point they kind of changed
very sarcastic.
The show. Yeah. Which, right up my alley.
Yeah.
So I got to write some stuff for the Barker Bird, and I turned that in, and I didn't really even know it, when it went into production, other than I was walking through the park one day and I saw him spewing out my words, and I was like, wow, that's kind of fun. Right. So it really depends.
So we'll just stick on the animation thing because I kind of get into the other better stuff. But so what's the framework that they say, all right, this is what we're looking for, Brian? Like they say, this is what it's about, go. Or do they say,
right.
It's got to be within this framework of, we're trying to tell the story of this, that, and the other thing, make it funny, make it entertaining, put sarcasm in. Are there guidelines, or they just kind of give you the blue sky thing and just say, bring something back and we'll figure it out from there? And I'm sure that probably varied by project.
It did. Most of the time, though, you're working within, I'm not going to say the constraints, but, in Imagineering, everything we do is about telling the story.
Right.
What's the story? And it's not like Once Upon a Time story. It's, what's the entertaining message that we want to give? What's the environment it's being told? And all of that stuff kind of blends together into the overall story.
Yeah.
So that's the very first thing. When I was given the Great Movie Ride, for example, to Plus, listen, that attraction had been open already for probably 2 or 3 years. And it was just that there were some places within the script that they felt needed to be freshened up. Some of the staging had to be updated. When another little funny story, but when the Great Movie Ride first opened up, so there's spoiler alert if you never went on it, but you're not going to
shame on you if you haven't.
Right.
And too bad now.
But right. but anyway, when you went on the Great Movie Ride, you were in one of 2 ride vehicles that were moving along. And at one point, you came into what we call Gangster Alley, and the vehicle in the front would keep going through a set of doors to the next scene, which was a Western scene. And either whichever scene you were in, either a gangster, 1930s, let's say gangster would come in and hijack the vehicle, or a Western bandit. So, when the Great Movie Ride first opened up, the way the gangster took over the ride vehicle, he would come out with his guns flashing and, say some stuff to the tour guide, and then actually shoot the tour guide.
Right.
And the tour guide had this rip-away pocket on his shirt with a little blood splat underneath of it. And he would do this, over-the-top dramatic. It was obviously, very funny and fake.
Right.
And, fall over a railing onto a mattress down below and, be out the scene. Well, I think they realized that at some point it probably wasn't a good idea to be shooting people inside the Disney attractions. Yeah, cast members. So they wanted to take that out. And one of the things that I did when I was working on the staging was put in very clear directions about, details as far as like how to hold the gun, where to point the gun when you're being, when it's being shot, things like that, where, how to give guests the best sight line, so where to stand and create the best show.
Yeah.
The gangster, the bandit, never from that point forward shot the gun towards a guest or towards the tour guide or towards any human for that matter.
Right.
They would always shoot either in the air or towards the ground or something like that. So
it's even like the stormtroopers today are always holding their gun upwards.
Right.
They never point them at any guest ever.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
And very interesting. Yeah, I do remember so many iterations of that attraction. It was always, well, it felt like it was always different. Because it did depend on who was the cast member leading the show, because sometimes you felt like they were just, going through the steps. And then others, had a little bit more heart into it.
Yeah. I'll tell you something really kind of interesting. First of all, the cast members that worked in the Great Movie Ride were, there are a couple of attractions like the Jungle Cruise skippers or the Haunted Mansion hosts and hostesses.
Yeah.
Those kind of roles are very iconic within the park, and the cast members that work in those roles tend to bond together. And even after they move on, either within their Disney career or afterwards, they stay in touch for a long time. And there's a very strong bond. But the point I was going to make to your observation about, having different levels of performance, one of the things that I did when at the same time I was plussing the script and the staging is I actually wrote backstories for the gangster and the bandit and actually the tour guide character as well. Nothing that the guests ever saw.
Right.
But when the new cast member was brought in, and trained, they were given, the backstory of the gangster who grew up on the streets of Chicago picking tourist pockets and, running booze for Al Capone and all that kind of a thing. And the same thing for the Western Bandit. And all of that was to hopefully kind of be able to put them in the mindset of those characters and to give more of a consistent show. If you will. So, there's a lot of thought of stuff like that goes into the attractions that a lot of people wouldn't even necessarily think of, but it's very cool.
Yeah. I know there's go ahead.
I remember.
Go ahead. I know there's a couple of.
No, let me say
something. I know two guys that are former movie ride hosts, and there's this large Facebook group where they still go and meet and have dinner and cocktails and go out. One guy is making the thing from the Egyptian scene, where you touch the thing. They're making that glows in the dark. I'm like, all right, wow. You guys are really taking your work home with you.
If you want to see something really cool, we did, because I'm kind of like an honorary member of that group. So they actually did during the Great Movie Ride Pandemic Edition, where they had former cast members, and actually I contributed a little bit too. Recreated not only every single scene within the attraction itself, but all the movie clips from the pre-show. Remember, you will watch like the previews, and the trailers, and then at the end, the beautiful montage was completely scene to scene was reproduced. And in my case, I did like the Dirty Dancing lift. I had like Woody and Buzz Lightyear little toys, and that's and then I actually rewrote the speech at the end. The operational speech to, now thanks for running the Great Movie Ride. Don't forget to give your tour guide, thunderous applause and remember me. That whole spiel was mine. So I got to reproduce that for the, and if you search on YouTube for Great Movie Ride Pandemic Edition, you can see that someone else actually did a very cool side-by-side video of our recreation of the end montage next to the actual one.
Wow.
And it's very fun.
So one last question, and then John's got one. Why do you think they never updated the movies in there? Because at some point nobody, the kids today wouldn't understand like Alien or, Singing in the Rain or John Wayne. They'd go, who the hell's that? So,
yeah.
we always ask ourselves, why didn't they ever update the movies in there to make it more current with the decade?
I think there are a couple reasons. One is licensing issues.
Yeah.
They, everything was, if it wasn't a Disney movie, they were MGM movies, obviously.
Right.
So I think there was some of that involved with it. I think part of it was that they were looking to kind of keep it in kind of like that older classic kind of movies.
Right.
And I don't think there was, plus, needless to say, it would be super expensive to like bring in new sets and animatronics and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you were talking about, backstory for the ride operators and the gangster. And what I've always found amazing is, there's always a backstory to everything that Disney does. And I think the one that floored me the most was I only got to visit Pleasure Island after its heyday, but going and discovering the backstory for Pleasure Island really was amazing. So the value that you bring, teaching people to, that there's more going on here than you just see and you're experiencing, because that helps in a lot of different areas in what I'm doing nowadays anyway. But that's fascinating that there's so many levels to the Imagineering process when it comes to creating story.
Yeah. It's just so cool for me, to learn there. Well, gosh, Meriwether Pleasure was, the founder of Pleasure Island, right? But, listen, I was a big fan of Disney before I ever worked for them, let alone became an Imagineer. And after I became an Imagineer and really kind of started like learning my craft and how to do the work of an Imagineer. I was really, every day just being amazed by I was working with and what I was learning and from doing and seeing. I mean, and I'll tell you one thing is that it wasn't unusual for like, the some of the older Imagineers to come to Florida and for either for work or business. A lot of them, some of them were still working at that time.
Yeah.
John Hench, I got to walk through Epcot in the Magic Kingdom with him, which was phenomenal.
Wow.
Raleigh Crump came and talked to us, and his son at one point, Chris Crump, was worked for WDI and worked in Florida, so I got to know Chris a little bit. And whenever these guys would come, they were just so gracious and so wonderful with their time and talking to us and telling us stories and stuff. I mean, just fantastic. I wish I had. We had iPhones back then. I could have gotten some really cool selfies, but
right. Or just start recording it.
Well, I'll tell if you have time. I'll tell you kind of like a really kind of a
Go ahead. Sure.
It was a very surreal moment. But the very first time after I got hired into Imagineering full time, they sent me out to Glendale, to 1401 Flower, to the headquarters, for a combination of work and business to do some stuff out there, and also like a little bit of an orientation to go out and see Imagineering in Glendale and what they do and meet with some folks and stuff. So I got out there and I walked in and I noticed like off to the side in the lobby, there was like a little art exhibit, like 3 rows of boards with all these pieces of artwork stuck up on them. And I kept wanting to like go check it out and see what that was. I figured, well, it's, in the lobby here, it's got to be something kind of cool. And I just never had time. I was just so busy. So finally, on my very last day, I was on my way out heading to the airport. And I said, I'm going to take a couple minutes. And I stopped and I went over to check it out. And I'm like looking and I'm going up and down the rows, and I turned a corner, and there was another couple there looking at the stuff, and the guy turns around, and it was Mark Davis.
Wow.
Mark with his wife Alice,
Wow.
who's a legend herself.
Yeah.
And all of the artwork were Mark's original artwork, his concept drawings for Pirates of the Caribbean and the Jungle Cruise and the Haunted Mansion. And, he's like, what do you think of this stuff? And I was kind of like, oh, it's okay, Mark. It's not too bad. And he kind of chuckled. And it was, I was amazed I could even breathe, to be honest. But it was just a very surreal moment because, there I was as a young Imagineer talking to certainly a legendary Imagineer,
right?
Looking at him, reviewing his own work, asking me, hey, how do you like it? And it was just a wonderful, precious memory for me to have.
Yeah, it's interesting too. You talk about that because even like at Destination D or D23, when they have the panels and the Imagineers come out, sometimes I feel like they're ambassadors to not only Imagineering, but the brand of Disney and the work of the attractions and things like that. Sometimes I feel bad for like Tony Baxter because, like, I don't know, they're like, hey, let's drag out Tony and he'll talk about, all the fun things he's done and tell, another generation of inspiring people, how to do this. But, I think that from what I've gathered from most of the ones I've spoke to is they enjoy it. They like going out and telling people these stories. And, it's always interesting. Marty always seemed to be playing it always closest to the vest. You would ask him a question, go, I really can't tell you that. Bob Gurr, on the other hand, would go, oh, I'll tell you all about that. So it depended on who you were talking about, on what kind of version of this story you were going to get, whether it was going to be the truth or some kind of Disney version of the truth. So, but that was great that you got to, talk to Mark and, see his art on display. Wow. Wow.
Fantastic.
That's crazy. Yeah.
There's so much nostalgia, and that's the big word. I mean, you're talking about Mark Davis, Alice Davis, and her story. Her story, especially with, the story that she tells about growing up and never having any dolls, to Walt Disney telling her, now all these dolls are yours.
Yeah.
And all your dolls will make impacts on other little girls. I mean, it's, and boys too, but I mean, it's that nostalgia factor that Tony and I love so much. So I have to ask this question. And we've recently seen this with the Great Movie Ride, and we're about to see it with, other attractions that you've worked on. How does it feel as, someone who worked so intimately with an attraction to see it either completely overhauled or, as in the Great Movie Ride's case, completely removed? How does that affect you? I mean, is there a lot of emotion? Yeah. I mean, obviously there's emotion, but how does that work on you?
Yeah. It's interesting. Part of it is that, that's part of the game, right? That, that it's kind of, eventually everything changes. So the fact that I've still got a few little bits and pieces of me hanging around out there, I'll take what I can get. But that said, I mean, listen, you can't work on these, beloved attractions without putting your heart and soul into it. And, in my case, it was really, it was kind of funny. I tell this to a lot of people, but like I would, go out to the parks and bring, friends or guests or whatever out there. And we'd be walking through the studios and, I'd say, well, I worked on the animation tour, but that's not here anymore. Or, I worked on this shuttle tour and that's not here. But I would always take solace in the fact that I also worked on the Great Movie Ride. And they're never going to take the Great Movie Ride away because that's like the marquee attraction. And then they announced, oh, we're taking the Great Movie Ride away. It's like that one stung a little bit. Because it's, if nothing else, I won't lie and say there is an elope of ego saying it's kind of cool to have that public legacy out there. And more than that, it's just so cool to be able to watch the guests enjoying stuff that you worked on.
Right.
It really, and I'll tell you something that's kind of another fun little story is that when the very first time I went out there, to ride Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway.
Right.
It was a really interesting experience. I actually one of the things that I do now as a former Imagineer is I'll walk people through the parks and kind of give them a tour of the parks from an Imagineering perspective. So I had just finished the tour in the morning, and I figured, well, I've got some time. Let me go check it out. And
Right.
it took me probably almost a year to get up, the nerve. It was just, that one was a little bit tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I get in line and I'm wearing my polo shirt and I've got my it was cool. So I had an Imagineering jacket and, I start just chatting with people in line and obviously they're, were you an Imagineer? And so I told them I was and what I'd done on the Great Movie Ride and, they asked me the same thing. How did it feel, when they changed it over? And I said, well, it's still tough. Sometimes I, like right now, I feel a little emotional. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just feel like crying. And,
Right.
They were so, first of all, they were just so appreciative
Right.
of being an Imagineer in the work I did. I'm not saying that in a, any kind of like, greater than thou kind of way or anything. It's just very nice, warm
Sure.
kind of feeling. And then they were very appreciative and loved the Great Movie Ride and shared stories about that with me.
Yeah.
And it was very, very special. And by the time we finally got there, they kept asking, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm fine. and we rode the thing. And then after we came out, they all, came up. It's like, let's get a picture and everything. Right. So, the Great Movie Ride might not be there anymore, but I know it lives on. As corny as it sounds, it lives on in people's hearts and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. It was a great attraction because it was part show, part animatronic. It was air conditioned. Everybody likes that part. You got out of the sun, and it was just fun. My
unique,
my kids, would crawl underneath the seat when they were young with the alien thing, which was always fun. But I think it had something, a little bit of something for everybody, And then at the end, when it shows all the real current kind of movies, everybody's like, "Oh, I like that. I saw that." So yeah. It's,
and then a couple of like little Easter eggs that were in there, which were really fun too. The hieroglyphics with Mickey and things like that.
I like the way, the pre-show, the way you go into the queue area. That was a nice little interesting touch. The whole wall blowing up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so, tell us a little bit about what you did for the Jungle Cruise. I know you mentioned the radio announcement. So what was that all about, Brian?
Yeah, so the Jungle Cruise has, that queue, I guess it's got, I don't know if historical context is the right word, but that was one of the first, if not the first, really kind of like first steps at Disney creating a more immersive kind of a queue, right?
Yeah.
Before that, it was just ropes and turnstiles, and then you would get on the boat and off you would go. But, they decided they wanted to theme it like the Jungle Outpost, so they brought in all these props and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're standing in line, you hear like this it's kind of nondescript 30s, 40s, let's say, radio broadcasts coming in over the speakers with these, old big band kind of music.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the narrator, Albert Awol, the host of the show, who makes these funny announcements. So I got to write, some of that scripting, but another story. I just happen to have one or two stories, but
that's good.
Kind of a cool story that again kind of touches my heart is you always hear about like the Imagineers kind of sneaking their name or bits and pieces of them into things and
right.
Whether or not that's condoned or not, I can't officially say or not. But at one point, when they were getting ready, I remember the show set designer came around our office and she said, she explained and showed us some drawings of what the queue was going to look like with this jungle outpost. And she said, if any of you guys have any like little props or anything like that maybe, you think would work in there, bring them in and maybe we'll, be able to use them. And my dad, when he was younger, was an avid pipe smoker and had a really cool collection. And, he had given it up a long time before that. But I stole a bunch of his, well, I actually asked him, but, got a bunch of his really cool, hand-carved pipes and stuff like that. And
wow.
So somewhere in the Jungle Cruise queue, and to this day, I haven't been able to get my eyes on them. So it's possible they never made it in, but I like to think they did. There's some of my dad's pipes in there.
Oh, wow.
Which, is, especially now as, I lost my dad about 5 years ago or so, but it's just, a really nice little kind of like, again, I use that word legacy quite a bit when I talk about Disney, but, just to kind of know that's kind of a very cool, little personal thing to me.
So you wrote the script and then they got voices or a person to record the actual?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't want my voice.
And like you're saying, that was all done in Glendale.
Yeah.
Good. Interesting. I know there's a recording studio here in Florida. Sorry, John. I think by the Animal Kingdom. Isn't there a recording studio?
Well, we used to go over to Disney Ideas, which was right there on property. It used to be the post-production house on the back lot of the studios, which is now obviously long gone. But when they were doing production, they had beautiful facilities. As a matter of fact, I remember one time we were doing, if I remember this correctly, we were doing pickup lines for, I want to say, Figment.
Oh, wow.
And the guy that came in, I think they were just a couple like temporary operational lines or something like that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a major enhancement, but we had to get some pickup lines of Figment, our little purple buddy. So I remember the guy that came in to do the lines. He walked in and he looked like a biker, man. This big grizzly kind of guy with this big old beard, and like he would like kill you in a second if you met him in a dark alley at night. And then he starts, going off into, hey, it's Figment, and the Figment voice and everything. And I probably had to like redo those takes several times because I was just like dying. I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So.
Hey, Brian, was there ever a project that you caught wind of that you really wanted to work on, but the cards just didn't pan out for you? The stars didn't align?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, there were some projects. Well, Star Tours would have been kind of fun for me to have worked on. But that was already done by the time I got into Imagineering. What I will say is that there were a couple projects I was given that I did do that never saw the light of day, which isn't unusual. And a lot of these are like smaller enhancements. And one example I've given before is for Pirates of the Caribbean. I came up with this idea where I thought it'd be really fun to have, like, as the guests are going through the castle, right, the queue area indoors, they've always played like, yo ho ho, it's Pirates Fly for me and music and stuff. Well, I came up with this whole script of like pirate sayings, like, I keep it moving, mateys, the captain will want to be seeing you in the dungeon. Right. And, things like that. And, quit your grumbling, liver, lily belly, whatever, just all these pirate, phrases and stuff. Yeah. And then it would be mixed in with like, sounds of water dripping and bats flying and stuff like that. I thought it was beautifully appropriate and, very atmospheric. And for whatever reason, it just never, happened. There's a million reasons why something like that couldn't have happened.
Yeah.
But
that is one cue that it's probably big enough to do some kind of interaction. And there are points where I think they could have done something, interactive. You know, and like you're saying, you know, put some, you know, more personality to the queue. Give it a little bit more life. Right. But
I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. Sure. I always like a good story in the queue. I think this is a good place for us to kind of wrap, because we have some other things that I don't want to kind of go down that rat hole quite yet, but there's some other things that we want to do.
I'll be here every month.
Yeah, exactly. So tell everybody, Brian, where they can find you. You know, shameless plug, anything you got going, websites, podcasts, books, whatever you got going.
The first thing I'll say is, if you don't subscribe to WDW magazine, make sure you subscribe. I have a monthly column in there called Figments of My Imagineering, and every month I write from an Imagineer's perspective on something different. So that's a lot of fun. And actually, we have a special edition. I don't know if you guys knew this yet or not, because it was only recently announced. Yeah. But there's a special edition that they're putting out that's all about the Haunted Mansion. It's everything. Wow. And I wrote a little deep dive on Raleigh Crump's Museum of the Weird and the history of that and everything, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah. But we had Raleigh Crump on, and he kind of talked about that a little bit. Yeah. He's a fascinating, I think he's a little bit on the edge.
The thing I remember, I remember, he just had a big smile that could light up a room. And just a very big personality.
Yes.
And just the nicest guy.
Yeah.
He was great.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's where my column is. But,
okay, good.
So shameless plugs. The first one I'll give is my website, wdwithme.com. So WDWITHME, wdwithme.com. And if you go there, that will have links to all my social media. If you Google Brian Collins Imagineer for LinkedIn or search that, you'll find me on LinkedIn. Please connect with me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page called The Mouse and the Imagineer. So please come join our page, The Mouse and the Imagineer. I also, if you're an educator, I have a really strong education background and am very passionate about education. So I have a Facebook page dedicated to teachers called Educate to Love Disney. So please find that. And if people want to email me, go to my website, learn about my tours, or learn about having, private dinner with an Imagineer, former Imagineer, I should say.
Right.
You can, get information and book that right there. So that's pretty much it. But I like to be liked. I like to be followed and not in the creepy kind of way, but in the social media
from a
kind
social
of way.
Media distant.
Right. Yeah. Hey, and if you're listening and you'd like to see Brian's writings and the articles for WDW magazine, they've been very gracious, and they've created a very special coupon code that we wanted to share with you. You can use the code Disney Parks Podcast for $10 off an annual digital edition, which is pretty cool. The code won't work on the month-to-month digital subscription or the print edition. It's $10 off the annual digital edition, and it's only active on this purchase on the purchase page, which I'm assuming is www.magazine.com.
Yeah, WDW Magazine. You click on annual edition, and it only works on that page. Yep.
Wow.
So that's cool.
They never gave me a discount.
Yeah, that's the joys of being the talent, right?
Use the code Disney Parks Podcast.
Well, Brian, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure, and I'm excited to see what's going to be coming down the pipeline for the next couple of months and beyond. There's so many great stories. It's a lot of fun, and I hope that everybody out there is listening. Lets us know that they love having Brian on, because he's going to be with us, and it's going to be an awesome ride. So thank you so very much for joining us.
Yeah, and if you don't like me, then my name is
Lou Mangello.
Lou Mangello.
No, that's yeah. Whatever. That'll work. All right, guys. We want to say thank you so much to Brian, as well as you guys, for listening. And hey, come find us all over the internet at WDW Park. No, sorry. Come find us all over the internet at, that's my own website. Make sure to come find us all over the internet, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all at Disney Parks Podcast. Join us on DisneyParksPodcast.com. And hey, as we always like to say, if we don't see you online, we'll see you in the Disney Parks Podcast.
The Disney Parks Podcast is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. All Disney parks, attractions, lands, shows, event names, etc. are registered trademarks of the Walt Disney Company.